Nancy Moore was 28 years old and worked in the accounting department of an insurance company. It was 3 p.m. when her husband Jack called her. "Hi, Nancy. Are you working overtime today?" Nancy sensed something was wrong in Jack's voice. "Are you okay, Jack? What's going on?" Nancy asked, feeling a little worried. "I'm fine. I came home early today and wanted to know if you'll be here by 5:30. No overtime today. Do you want me to leave now, dear?" Jack replied. "Don't worry. I'm just going to rest for now. See you later." Jack hung up the phone. Nancy was sure something was bothering Jack. She immediately went to her boss's office. "Nancy, today we need to review some files during overtime," Alan Perkins reminded Nancy with a wide smile before she could say anything. "Alan, I'm here to ask for permission to leave early. Are you okay?" Nancy frowned. "I'm fine. It's Jack. I think he's not feeling well. He just called me from home." "Do what you need to do, Nancy. We can catch up next time." She looked at her boss and nodded. When Nancy entered the house, she found Jack dozing on the couch. "I'm home, dear. Are you feeling okay?" "Yes, of course." Jack sat up. "I'm just a little tired." "You're home early." He looked at the clock. "I left work right after your call." "I know you, Jack Moore. Something is bothering you." Nancy sat next to him on the couch. "The thing is, we need to talk." Jack turned his face and looked Nancy in the eyes. "Oh, God." Nancy thought, "Please, I don't want any bad news." She took a deep breath. "What do you want to talk about, Jack?" she asked with fear. "I don't know where to start. Lately, we have been drifting apart." Nancy frowned. "I'll be honest with you, Nancy. I have fallen out of love with you." "What, dear? We are a married couple, and we have many plans for our future. You know that in a couple of months, I'll stop taking the pills. As we discussed, I want to have our first child by the beginning of next year. We'll buy our own house, and I know." "Nancy," Jack interrupted. "I've met someone." Nancy couldn't hold back her tears. "Yes, a young woman, and we're in love. I'm sorry, but there's no easy way to tell you this." "But Jack, how could you do this to me?" Nancy was still trying to process what was happening. "We've known each other for 5 years and have been married for 3. In the last 6 months, you changed and started neglecting me." "I never neglected you, Jack. I was always here for you. You started with your weekly overtime work, sometimes twice a week." "But Jack, I was doing it for us. We need the money to buy a house. Then you began your weekly nights out with your colleagues. After that, you went shopping every Saturday for a couple of hours a day. I worked so hard, Jack. I need a little break for myself. Have you ever thought about me?" Jack almost shouted, "Instead of meeting with your colleagues, we could have gone on a date once a week. On Saturdays, we could have gone shopping together." Nancy stared at the floor. Now she realized what she had done. "Please, Jack, I love you. We can work this out." "Nancy, 3 months ago, when I talked to you about these problems, you were angry. You even raised your voice at me. Do you remember?" "I'm really sorry, Jack, if I hurt you. 3 months ago, I didn't see it that way. Now I know I was only thinking about myself. Please, Jack, give me one more chance. Let's work on our marriage." 3 months ago, I was completely depressed. During my lunch break, this woman came over and sat next to me. She works in a different department. She noticed I was upset. She talked to me. A few days later, she asked what was wrong in my life. I told her everything. I needed to share my pain with someone, and she became a shoulder to cry on. Is she the one? Yes, Nancy, she is the one. And gradually, we felt an emotional attraction and eventually fell in love with each other. What's her name? What does she do? Nancy asked, tears streaming down her face. Her name and what she does aren't important. It's better if you don't know. Were you too close? Yes, Nancy, I'm very sorry. How could you? Nancy cried out, Nancy, tell me, when was the last time you were intimate? Well, it was a month ago, and it wasn't intimate. It was just a quick moment because you were so tired then. For the past 6 months, you've always been tired. We've only been close 3 times. But Jack, you should have asked. You should have done something. Nancy, intimacy is a part of a couple's life. It happens naturally. There's nothing to ask about. So you got from her what I wasn't giving you. Yes, and even more. Nancy frowned. She does things you always refuse to do. She always pleases me. She likes to care for me, which I enjoy very much. Things you never did. But I never knew you liked that. Nancy tried to argue. Also, she allowed me to enter through the back door. You always refused because you said you didn't like that. Ever since we've been together, I've tried several times to convince you to try it, but you always refused. So she's better than me. Nancy sobbed. I would say I get more pleasure from her. She always tries to find the sensitive spots on my body. I'm sorry, Jack, if I couldn't be enough for you, you'll be served tomorrow. I filed for divorce due to irreconcilable differences. Today, I took 50% of our savings. We'll keep our respective cars. We both work, so there's no question of alimony. The lease on this house expires in a few months. I'll stay here tonight. I'll move into the guest room. You should call your parents and explain everything. I assume you'll move in with them. Will she move in here in the meantime? No, she won't. She doesn't want to touch your things or furniture or anything else that reminds her of you and our time together. In fact, we've already found an apartment in a new complex. We chose an apartment with a balcony overlooking the lake. The building will be ready in a couple of months, which is good for me since I'll need to move out of here around the same time. That's exactly where I had planned to move and wanted to convince Jack to buy an apartment there, Nancy thought. But why do you move in with her? Nancy asked. She has a roommate in her 2-bedroom apartment, and they initially decided not to bring any third parties. For this reason, we always had to book a room in a motel, and sometimes we did it in the backseat of my car. Jack, I love you and want to spend the rest of my life with you and grow old together. Is there any way we can work on our marriage? I'll overlook your 3-month affair with this girl. I'll never bring it up, I promise. I'll give you everything she gives you. I'll never refuse you anything. We can go to counseling. Unfortunately, Nancy, I've already made my decision. Jack stood up. I'm going to take my things to the guest room and get some rest. What if I refuse the divorce? I'll fight it. You'll spend a lot of money on attorney fees, and in the worst case, I'll just leave with her. I'll remain married to you, but I won't live with you. You can't do that. It's illegal. It really isn't. There's no law in this country that can force me to stay here with you. Jack, don't go, Nancy exclaimed. Later, she called her parents and briefly explained the situation. Half an hour later, they were sitting next to her in the living room. How could he do this to you? John, Nancy's father, was furious. He can't throw away 3 years of marriage just because you didn't take care of him for a few months. Mary shouted, he should have talked to you and worked things out. It was my fault. Mom Nancy wiped away her tears. I neglected him, and that pushed him into her arms. He needs to understand that you did all this for both of you, and you needed some time for yourself because of your demanding job. John said, I want to talk to him. Please call him here. No, Dad, he's resting. You can talk to him in a couple of days when you calm down. Are you going to pack your things and come with us? We'll help you, Mary said to her daughter. No, Mom, I'll stay, Nancy said, while her parents looked confused. I'll try to win him back. Are you sure? Both parents asked simultaneously. Yes. All right, we're leaving now. But if anything happens, just call us. Understand? Yes, Dad. Nancy went to her room and cried until she fell asleep. In the middle of the night, she woke up and went down to the kitchen. She found an empty pizza box next to the trash can. He didn't wake me for dinner. He ordered food just for himself. Nancy thought she drank a glass of water and went back to bed. The next morning as she left her room, she heard the garage door slam and Jack's car speed away. She got ready and drove to work before lunch. Alan Perkins, her boss, called Nancy into his office. You've been acting strange since this morning. It looks like you've been crying. Is everything all right at home? He asked. Jack is divorcing me. What? How? He found someone else. He's in love with her. I'm really sorry, he said. I neglected him. And it's true. Nancy lowered her head. He found comfort in a young woman who works at his company. Do you need some time off? You can take as many days as you need. I'll let you know when I need them. For now, I prefer to come to work, but I won't be staying late. I understand. That day, Nancy made Jack's favorite dish. When he came home, the kitchen was filled with its aroma. He went straight to his room without saying a word to Nancy. Later, he came downstairs, washed up, and changed clothes. I have a date tonight, he said to Nancy. I made dinner for both of us. Nancy nearly cried. It's better if you don't cook for me as we'll be eating separately from now on. As you wish, Jack. When should I expect you back? I don't know when I'll return. Jack headed to the door. I love you, Jack. Tears streamed down her face. Jack closed the door behind him. The next day when Nancy returned home, Jack was already there. Nancy put away her purse and went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. The doorbell rang. It's for you, Jack said without looking at Nancy. She frowned and went to open the door to a man in a suit. Are you Mrs. Nancy Moore? Yes, I am. You've been served. He handed her a manila envelope. Have a good evening, ma'am. The man turned and walked away. Nancy nearly fainted as she took the envelope. She had to lean against the wall. Please sign this and let's move on, Jack said to her back. Nancy turned and looked Jack straight in the eyes. So I neglected you for 6 months and you forgot all the good times we had together. I told you I would change and I will. I'll be a better wife and a better friend. Please, I'm begging you, Jack. I'm asking for just one more chance. It was a mistake. Can't you forgive me? Mistake? How can it be a mistake? You planned everything in advance. It's not what you think. Then tell me what I'm supposed to think. About how good we used to have it and how you ended it. And believe me, the time I'm spending with her now is much better than what we had. Just sign the papers, all right." Jack went to his room. Nancy sat down and with trembling hands opened the envelope. She looked through the documents and signed them. Later, when she entered her room, she heard Jack talking on the phone. His door was open. "Yes, baby," he said. "You were served this afternoon. The countdown has started. I love you too, honey. You're going to stop taking the pills right now. That's a good idea. We can get married right after the divorce with your baby bump. You'll look fantastic in your wedding dress." "What? We'll be close in your white dress." "Oh God, you excite me." Nancy went into her room and closed the door behind her. "If only I could turn back time," she said to herself. The next day she woke up early, left the papers on the kitchen table, and went to work. There she called her parents and told them about her situation. They asked her to pack her things and leave the house. She only replied that she would. Later, she told Alan Perkins that she had signed the divorce papers. "You must be having a tough time," he asked. "You can't imagine how much it feels like my whole world has collapsed." Nancy sighed. "You shouldn't let yourself be humiliated. You're still young. Maybe life has other good things in store for you." "Jack was my future and I ruined everything. Would you like to go for a drink after work to relieve some of the pressure?" Alan Perkins asked. It all started with drinks after work. Nancy turned and walked to her workstation. Days passed and Jack came home late after having dinner at a restaurant. When he was home, he made himself sandwiches. He did his own shopping. Nancy began acting more provocatively at home, walking around in shorts and a tank top without a bra. Sometimes she came to the kitchen wrapped in a towel when Jack was there. She played music and songs that he liked the most. Sometimes she leaned in close to him. She always waited for him in the evening and tried to start a conversation. Sometimes he refused, pretending to be tired and went to his room. But sometimes he would sit and listen to her. She never talked about the other woman. She always felt it was necessary to bring out their old memories together, where she saw the sparkle in his eyes and the smile on his face. But then he would change the subject. On weekends, Jack would mow the lawn or find something to keep himself busy avoiding Nancy. In the evenings, he would go out alone and return very late. One Friday, she called Jack and invited him on a date that evening for dinner and dancing. He agreed. She was extremely happy. Even her colleagues noticed the change in her. She returned home early and got ready. She polished her nails and chose the dress Jack liked the most, a turquoise pleated dress with short sleeves. She styled her hair and carefully applied makeup. They had a nice dinner talking about everything except their actual situation. At some point, Nancy felt that everything that had happened in the past 6 months was like a bad dream, and she had just woken up, leaving it all behind. It felt as if they were still the madly in love couple they once were. After dinner, they took their drinks and sat near the dance floor. A man came over and invited Nancy to dance. She looked at Jack, who shrugged. She politely declined, and the man walked away. "Will you dance with me?" she asked Jack. Without saying a word, Jack stood up, took her hand, and led her to the dance floor. They danced for 5 songs in a row, moving in sync with the music. As they were returning to their table, a slow song began to play. Without a word, Nancy pulled Jack onto the dance floor, pressed herself against him, and rested her head on his shoulder. He felt her breath on his neck. For weeks, she had wanted to hold him, feel his presence next to hers, and reconnect. She pressed tightly against him and felt his warmth. Holding Jack close, she slowly swayed her hips, rubbing against him. She didn't care if people were watching or what they might think. She was with her man and could do whatever she wanted. She suddenly pressed forward, and he responded. "Let's go home," Jack whispered in her ear. Nancy smiled. On the way back, Jack focused on driving while Nancy sat and hummed the songs they had just danced to. After Jack parked the car in the garage, Nancy ran to her room, left the door open, undressed, and lay on the bed, waiting for her husband. Jack walked down the hall, past Nancy's room without even glancing at her, and went to the guest room. Stunned, Nancy lay on the bed, trying to understand what had happened. She jumped up and rushed to the guest room. Opening the door without knocking, Jack was there. "What's wrong? Why aren't you coming to your wife? It's been weeks since you connected with me, and I'm incredibly lonely. And I know you are too, as I felt your closeness on the dance floor." "Nancy, we're getting a divorce. We can't be together intimately. We're still married, and I'm still your husband. Please, darling, connect with me." She approached Jack and tried to embrace him. He avoided her and sat on his bed. "Take what's yours, Jack. You can have my love. Do whatever you want with me. I'm all yours. I'll never refuse you anything." She sat next to him and tried to kiss his lips. He turned away, and she ended up kissing his cheek. "Please, Jack, don't leave me. Don't divorce me. I love you. I'm only asking for your forgiveness. I know we can work things out. Let's just forget about these difficult 6 months as if they never happened. You can do it, Jack, because you don't hate me." "It's a bit late, Nancy. It's never too late, Jack. Your vulnerability led you to someone else. You're susceptible because of the situation I created. I was foolish and selfish. I understand my mistakes and promise they will never happen again. I'll be the best wife on this earth." Jack said nothing, his eyes distant. Nancy knelt before him and took his hands in hers. "I'll be your support, Jack. Your wish is my command. You can guide me every day. Support me for what I did to you. Respect me, but Jack, be my husband until death do us part," she cried. "I can't." Jack looked her straight in the eyes. "But why can't you?" "Because I can't betray her." Nancy jumped up in anger. Her, she screamed. "By the way, who is she? Can't you see that she's a homewrecker? That woman seduced you and took advantage of your vulnerability. She knew you were married and it didn't stop her from being with you. How do you know she won't betray you? She won't do that. No matter what you tell me now, what you'll do, she'll always be more to me than that." Resigned, she walked to the door and stopped. "I'm tired, Jack. This divorce is eating me up inside. Tomorrow morning, I'll call my parents to come and help me pack my things," she said, not facing him. "I'm truly sorry for my mistakes. Please forgive me for the pain I caused you. I wish I had been wiser. I wish you a happy life with your future wife." She went to her room, her head down. The next morning, Nancy's parents arrived early. "Dark circles under your eyes?" Mary asked. Nancy didn't reply. "You should have left this place the first time he dropped the bomb on you," John said to his daughter. "I know Dad, but I wanted to win him back. Just forget about him. There are plenty of young men who would fall in love with you in an instant." Mary snapped. "I have a few words for that person." "Wake him up," John said angrily. "Just leave him alone. You'll waste your time." "Dad, Mom, please help me with the packing." "You wanted to talk." Jack was coming down the stairs. "Yes, you jerk." John's face turned red with anger. "You're a real person. I need to tell this person what I think of them." John turned to Jack. "Because of your male ego, you can't accept that your wife also needs some personal time. She worked very hard, putting in overtime, and for what? To bring in extra money so you both could buy a house sooner, as planned. Maybe she overdid it a bit with her nights out or Saturday shopping, but she needed to relax. She acknowledges her mistake and is asking for forgiveness. And what do? You cheat on her with the first person you meet and make her cry out of love for you." Jack remained silent, staring John straight in the eyes. Nancy grabbed her father's hand and tried to pull him upstairs to her room. "The first day you brought him to our house, I knew he wasn't right for you, Nancy. You were so deeply in love that I kept quiet and prayed I was wrong." "Come on, John." Mary tried to calm him. "We have more important things to do." Mother and daughter took John by the arms and led him upstairs. Jack opened the door and saw John's van in the middle of the driveway. He decided to walk 2 blocks to the nearest cafe. 3 months later, the day before the hearing, Nancy took a few days off from work. Along with her parents, they went to spend some time at their summer cottage. She wanted to get away from the crowd. She knew the divorce would be granted by the judge and didn't want to attend the court. She didn't want to be bothered by friends and colleagues. She asked her parents to turn off their mobile phones. The next morning at 11 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. All three looked at each other. No one knew where they were. Mary opened the door to Jack, who was standing at the entrance. "I need to say something to Nancy, and it would be good if you were present." Jack said to Nancy's parents, "How dare you come here, you jerk? Get off my property right now," John shouted. Nancy remained silent. She didn't know what to do. "I tried calling and even went to your house. I assume all your mobile phones are off," Jack said, addressing Mary and ignoring John. "I knew you would all be here." "What do you want, Jack?" Nancy found the courage to ask. "The judge granted the divorce today at 10 in the morning. As of today, we are single. You came all this way just to tell my daughter that you're single again." Mary raised her voice. "Please leave before I break your jaw." John pointed a finger at Jack. "My daughter has suffered for the last 3 months, and you came here today to drive the final nail in the coffin." "I suffered for 6 months, and no one ever noticed," Jack shouted. Everyone was stunned by Jack's sudden outburst of anger. He pushed Mary aside and entered the room. "I never had a mistress," Jack snarled at Nancy. "I never cheated on you, Nancy. It was a setup." "But why?" Nancy was shocked by Jack's revelation. John and Mary were frozen in place. "Why? Can you say the same thing?" Jack asked. "Say what?" "That you never cheated on me." Nancy suddenly felt weak in the knees. She couldn't stand and collapsed onto a chair. Jack turned to his former father-in-law. "For the past 6 months, this person has been with her boss, Alan Perkins." The room suddenly fell completely silent. John and Mary couldn't believe their ears. They looked at their daughter. She couldn't meet their eyes and began to cry. All those overtimes, nights out, or Saturday shopping sprees, it was all a lie. You were with him in motels or in the backseat of his car. "I had a private detective following you, and I have evidence, many pieces of evidence." "Please, dear," John pleaded with Nancy. "Tell me this isn't true, that he's lying. I'm so sorry, Nancy cried out. I could have divorced you with all the evidence I had, but I wanted to do something to make you suffer, to make you feel what I felt, to know what it means to be deceived. I wanted you to hurt, to feel the pain, to bleed. Jack spat. You did with him what you always refused to do with me. You know what I'm talking about. You allowed him to disrespect me while he was with you. You gave him what belonged to me. You disrespected me. You had no time for me, but you spent every free minute with him. You're the worst partner I know. Nancy cried louder. Mary held her husband tightly. Turn on your phone. There should be hundreds of calls from work and LN. Nancy frowned, took her cell phone, and turned it on. She had many missed calls and messages. Since we were still married yesterday, my lawyer filed a lawsuit against the insurance company and Alan Perkins. Alienation of affection is still a crime in our state. Oh no, Nancy exclaimed. According to my lawyer, we could get up to 7 figures. One good thing about your affair is that it will bring me some money. Jack laughed. Nancy looked at her phone. The missed calls were from her workplace and Alan Perkins. She read the latest text message, which was from HR, asking her to call them as soon as possible. She scrolled down to Alan's message. He was furious. By the way, yesterday I contacted Alan's wife and gave her a set of the evidence. She said she'd send him packing and prevent him from seeing their 2 kids. She even offered to help me in revenge and promised to do whatever I wanted. I'm meeting her tonight since I'm now single. He has a family. Why did you do this? Nancy asked. I didn't do anything. You destroyed their home when you started being with him. And you know what's funny? I plan to move in with Mrs. Perkins for a while, just to rub it in Alan's face because he'll still have to pay the mortgage while I support her in his own home. It's best if you leave now, Jack, John said. We need to deal with our own suffering right now. I'm not finished yet. Jack growled at John and turned to Nancy. I'm sure the insurance company has already fired you. Alan, too. He had inappropriate relations with you after hours at your workplace and arranged for your overtime. I don't think he'll find another job in the financial sector. Nancy couldn't look Jack in the eyes. She just shook her head. By the way, last month I lost a bag with a set of your famous evidence, and this morning I found out they were uploaded to the internet with your names, phone numbers, and addresses. Jack smirked. Don't worry about being fired. I'm sure you'll get roles in other industries. Oh my God, Nancy fainted. Now I'm done. Jack walked to the door and turned to face John. This person wants nothing to do with any of you and never wants to see you again. That thing can rot in. He turned and left the room. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.